We're back again to tackle our live stream topic of the week. And this week, we're going to be talking about co-parenting challenges in a marriage or relationship. And this could be blended family, this could be nuclear family, this could be any kind of co-parenting situation where you find that your relationship is challenged by different ideas about how to handle discipline or how to handle any kind of parenting decision, really. There's a lot of power struggles that come up or difference of opinions, and people can get into gridlock or there can be hurt feelings. And it's a really loaded topic. The stakes are high. It can, parenting stuff can really trigger our own traumas or our own areas of sensitivity. And so fighting around parenting stuff is really almost like taking a stand for trying to change your family legacy. If there's stuff that you find yourself repeating and you don't want to be repeating it, the stakes is very high and it's charged. So this is a really common thing, and this comes up a lot with our clients, even in relationships that are fairly good. Actually, this can be a big sticking point. And I find that a big problem around this is that people stay stuck in the problem with this and have a really difficult time trying to align with, like, what are our shared values and how do we come together as a team rather than fighting each other. So today we're going to get into this a little bit and talk about what are the biggest problems that come up around co-parenting. I'm back again with Kelly and Ned Vandevert, who not only are coaches inside the Couples Cure, but they're also parents of 8 children together between them. And they have a lot of experience with co-parenting issues. And so this is going to be really interesting to hear how you guys navigate some of this stuff, what you have found to be true in your own personal experience, and also in working with clients professionally. So what we're going to do is just talk about what are the common problems that come up around co-parenting in really broad strokes. If you guys have specific questions, you can certainly ask in the comments below, but we're just going to really do sort of a broad strokes overview of this. And then what some solutions could be. And, not in very specific parenting topics, although we might be able to use some examples, but really in terms of how to energetically shift into how do we get on the same team and collaborate, even if we might have a difference of opinion. So first, let's start with what is the biggest problem that we see around co-parenting? How often does this come up? And for me, it comes up a lot, obviously, and especially with clients that we have that have younger children. I find that it really comes up in early parenting, because then you're asking yourself questions that you never really had to think about before. Problems come up that you don't anticipate, and it's like, oh, how do I want to handle this? And you might not have been able to even talk about it until the problem arises. Now you realize, oh, we're not on the same page. Yeah. So what would you say comes up the most for you guys?
Well, what I see a good bit, Monika, you were talking about in early parenting, I see a lot with clients who've been together for a number of years, and maybe their kids are like teenagers, or maybe they're even young adults. And because it's been going on for so many years that the parents have different parenting styles, that they never really from the beginning got on the same page around parenting, because everyone comes from different backgrounds and everyone is raised differently and has their own lenses and traumas and values and goals and life dreams when it comes to the children. And if you didn't have a sit down in the beginning about all those different things and talk about, okay, well, how do we want to raise our kids? What's important to us? Like, what about discipline? What about the shared responsibilities? What about always being on the same team? Because that's so crucial when you're raising kids, to be on the same team. And if the whole time through your marriage, you haven't been on the same team, you haven't been a united front, what I see a lot is you've got teens and you've got young adults, and one of the parents always pitted against the other parent.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. I see a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I see one parent and they've got the kids on their side, and it's like the parent and the kids against the other parent. Mm-hmm. And it happens, women will do that with children and men will do that with children, and pit the kids against the adult. Because what happens is, when the kids are younger, when they're smaller, and they see that mom and dad aren't on the same team, they're very manipulative, and they're very, very, they do it naturally. They use it to get their own way about things. And then what happens is it just becomes this really unhealthy dynamic that by the time they're teenagers and young adults, it's like mom or dad with the kids against the other parent.
Yeah. And it can also just be a real betrayal for the parent who feels like they're on the outs.
Yes.
It's a lot more hurtful, I think, than people realize. That the parent that might be on the inside with the kids might not realize how much of a betrayal that is to the parent that feels like they're on the outside.
And it's really dysfunctional.
And then the child gets blamed, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
Right.
I think kids are just going to do what kids do, and they don't have, their brains aren't developed yet. They're just going to align with what feels like the safest thing for them and to get their needs met, and that's their own survival instincts. But then to pay the price in the form of like, now it's the child's fault. That happens a lot, where then they're like mad at the child, and then the child feels responsible for the marital problems, and that's not fair to the kid. It's not fair to the couple.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have a person, one of the spouses is immature in dealing with that, that is how it can show up, where you do have a parent having resentment against his own child. And that's unfortunate, because it's just created from, this child naturally seeking, and sometimes approval, sometimes it is a manipulation to get what they want also. If they see that there's an advantage to working with one parent against the other, it can create a huge issue. And that, again, going back to what Kelly was saying, that's where it's so important to have a united front as a team.
And it's the parent's responsibility to hold that unified front. Yeah. And so this is where it gets tricky, because I think a lot of parents understand that, and couples instinctively know, and they feel really stuck because they're like, I know I'm supposed to be a unified front, but here's the problem. I have an idea about what I want to do for discipline. Like, let's say I have a child that I feel like, I want to do things medically a certain way. Let's say I'm pro all the vaccines and my husband isn't. Or let's say my child has ADHD and I want the meds and he doesn't. Or maybe there's a certain discipline approach that I believe in or don't believe in. Like, let's say I'm totally against physical, discipline, and my spouse is very much pro physical discipline. That's the question I get. How do we get to be a unified front when we really have such different opinions?
Honestly, I think part of, since we're talking about nuances, in terms of the difficulties that are presented as parents, we're talking about vaccinations or any host of issues that can come up. Sometimes I think, if you have a person who has a strong opinion about, something like vaccinations, and somebody else is like, no, my kid's not having that. I think it's up to both of you to really do your research around certain issues, and specifically to kind of both of you can gain a clear understanding and not have to just go, I'm just taking your word for it or against it. So I think working together in that capacity, it'll help you kind of, move towards a solution a little bit easier. But that takes a certain level of maturity also. So in certain cases, like you're talking about, where a person is just so staunch, they don't even want to, listen to the other person,
right?
Or consider their opinion.
Yeah.
I think, now you're dealing with a personal issue, from that person, because as parents, it's our job to model for our kids how to behave first and foremost, right? So you have to exude a certain level of maturity with one another so that your children can see that again. But if you're not capable of doing that, you kind of, you might want to have a conversation about that too, together. It doesn't have to be in the presence of the children, but just kind of to see where it's coming from,
Yeah. Right. And I think that what I think, like with what we were saying, I see respect as such a big part of that maturity. You have to respect that my spouse might have a really valid point of view, even though I know I'm right. Like, you might think you're right. I think I'm right. And they're just really uninformed.
Yeah.
And so, or they might feel like I've done the research and they won't even look at it. How do you get your spouse to look at it?
Yeah.
You have to be willing to respect your spouse enough to at least research the things that they think are important, even if you think it's not important.
Right.
And recognizing that there is no objective truth in a relationship. And so you have to be willing to really consider the other person's, always look for the validity in your spouse's point of view. Because if you stay in a position of like, I just need to convince them of why I'm right, then everything will be fine. And they're just resisting that. Or they might be feeling like, well, I know I'm right, so we'll never see eye to eye, and you remain in gridlock. But if you just go, all right, actually, there's lots of different ways to raise children.
Yeah.
I look at families who raise their children completely differently, and they turned out just fine. Both, each set of kids, even though they were raised completely differently from each other. So it's not about like convincing each other. It's about saying, all right, you believe this, I believe this. How can we come together and make a decision and be a unified front?
Yeah.
It's asking the question on a higher level. And that maturity that you're saying, Ned, to me, that really involves the willingness to be humble and to disagree, but still collaborate.
Yeah.
And to not feel like you can't collaborate unless you agree on everything.
Right.
That's the truth.
Right. Yeah.
And that takes mutual respect. You have to be willing to
Right.
Yeah. And like what we always say is like our core foundation at home, in our home and with one another, is mutual love and respect. And that's first. And if that's not at the table, then we check it. We check it within ourselves. We check one another. We check our kids. Mutual love and respect. And so when you're talking about these themes that run throughout parenthood, discipline, vaccines, health, just whatever it is, school, you need to be able to sit down at the table as two people who are on the same team, who love each other, and with mutual love and respect at the forefront of your mind, have a conversation about, your different lenses and your different values and your different goals and what it all means to each one of you individually. And, and how do we want to raise these kids in a way that's mutually loving and respectful of them, of ourselves? What are the boundaries? You just have to have a mature conversation.
Yes. And it might be more than one conversation. It might be a series of conversations.
Totally. I mean, we have conversations about it every single day being parents, so
we're always recalibrating. But I think you're right. The most important thing is to come together and say, and first figure out where you line up. It might come as like, all right, on the surface, it looks like we have a completely different opinion about something and we can't see eye to eye. But if we really come together and look at what are our values behind that, well, what I value is having a child that has a sense of responsibility. I value having a child that takes accountability and is able to say, hey, I'm sorry, that was wrong, or is willing to take responsibility for their homework. Or I want a child that will know how to communicate their feelings in a respectful way. Whatever it is that is your big picture, your values that you hold dear as a parent, you'll probably find that you have similarities. You might just disagree on how to get them there.
Yeah.
But once you see, oh, we're lined up in this way.
Yeah.
We both want children that are respectful and accountable and understand boundaries and are going to be successful in life. We both want that. So that helps you just remember that you are, in fact, already on the same team.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of the execution. And then it just becomes, this can be a solvable problem because at least our why and our what are the same. And now our how might not be the same, but we can figure that becomes a solvable problem when you're aligned.
Right.
Yeah. And when, parenting is one of those things that, will trigger you like a what, and at times. And so, you just have to be really careful when you're parenting that you're coming from a place of disciplining. And this is for both spouses, right? Disciplining from a place of, okay, this is what my kid needs right now from me in the moment. And this isn't coming from a place of me and my own traumas and my triggers. You know what I mean? Because that's the wrong place to be coming from. And there's a fine line between the two.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of parenting arguments come from that place of reactivity.
Exactly.
The adaptive child, the trauma, and it comes from on the heels of a disagreement or a charged situation. And
Totally.
so it's better to cool off first and come back together fully conscious, fully aware. What are my values? What are my goals? How can I be curious about my spouse's point of view? How can we remember the love? All of those things happen when you're calm.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of couples get in the habit of, like, when things are calm, let's not rock the boat. Let's just enjoy the peace. And then hopefully we'll line up, and then hopefully, this won't happen again. But if you haven't talked about it proactively,
Right.
same kinds of things are going to come up, and then you're fighting again because you haven't really resolved anything. So you have to be willing to use the times of peace to come together and risk rocking the boat to tackle some of these larger parenting conversations.
Totally. Yeah.
It's hard because you're like, but we're just getting along right now, and I just want to watch a show. I don't want to have a parenting conversation. The kids are asleep. It's hard, but you have to actually risk that in order to build that foundation.
Totally. Yeah.
So how do you guys do it? I'm curious. You guys are pretty on the same page, which is very fortunate because you have so many children and there's blended family situation, right?
Yeah.
What have you done when you're not on the same page? How do you guys tackle some of these things that come up? Where like it comes like boundary setting, back talk. How do we get them to do their homework, screen time, all of these things? How do you handle that?
Well, we've always really been on the same team. Fortunately, we parent really in very similar ways, which we both come from a place of balance. There's a lot of love. But there's also a lot of discipline. So there's both. There's equal, and they're equal.
Mm-hmm.
And
it comes more from a place of fairness, though. That's the primary thing, is like we want to be fair with ourselves and fair with our children.
Mm-hmm.
But in those cases where, I don't mean to interrupt you, babe, but I just had this thought. But in the cases where, we don't necessarily agree, a lot of the conversations happen in the backdrop, behind the curtain of the actual stage, because, these are things we sit back and take each other on and say, hey, why did you do that way? Or, what were you saying? Or what did you mean when you said this? Because it kind of threw me off, but a lot of the conversations happen away from the children, not right in front of them, because like I said, the most important thing is for them to understand that we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And when they see that, it really dislodges a lot of the dysfunction on their part, or even trying to do things that, with a manipulation on the part of one parent. Now, it does happen every now and then, the child will come to me and ask me a question that they want approval of. Can I go outside? And they just ask, Kelly. And it's not, so I mean, little stuff like that. So in that case, I will look at them and go like this. Did you ask your mom? Like we're arguing the answer, so yeah, I mean, so, and that's what I mean. So they get,
even if you would have said yes, you now know that Kelly said no, so you're going to back her. That's good.
Yeah. We know that that's the case. So the kids begin to understand that too.
And if I said, "Oh, you can do this," and I said someone could do this, and Ned, then they go and they ask Ned, and he says no, then I'll say, "Hey, babe, I told him that they could do that," and then he's like, "Oh," okay.
And I'll usually go, "Okay."
Right. Same here. We do that too.
But but we check in with each other a lot. For me personally, Ned has, and I shared this with you earlier, Monika, really the only thing that between Ned and I that's been, like, there have been times where he doesn't agree with the fact that I don't want to address, especially my boys, because I'm exhausted, or I just can't deal, or don't want to deal, and I would just rather him handle it. And he lets me know, he's like, "No, I always have your back, but you need to stand up, and you need to let them know that they don't talk to you like that, they don't treat you like that, and you need to stand up for yourself and put the boundary in place." So he does not like it when I don't exert the boundary. He does not. And that's been a challenge for me, because he is my protector, but he wants me to, from his perspective, because a lot of times men
respect you. It's not that they're going to respect you because a man said to.
right.
They're going to respect you because you're.
I need a first line of defense first.
Yeah.
So, because men can see things, ladies, a lot of times that we can't see. We're such nurturers, and love blinds us, as women, as mothers, as wives, a lot of times, and men can see these defiances in our children sometimes that we can't as women see, and so what I say to that is I've always relented to Ned and trusted him that he's, doing it properly. But yeah, that's how we do it.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's awesome. In the beginning, when my son, who's now 15, was little, I made the mistake of like getting involved in the parenting that he was doing right in front of our son, questioning it, saying, no, don't do it like this. Do it like this. Like,
oh,
a much nicer way of doing that, and I would kind of get it. And then when my son started getting old enough to like understand what was going on and was splitting a little bit, then I had to learn not to do that and have it be something that we talked to, because I might be thinking, yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. But as long as it's not abusive, as long as it's not crossing my lines, my major lines, it can always wait. And that's what I would recommend, is wait until you're separate from them. We're out of earshot, and then say, hey, when I heard this, it made me think about this. And it's really important to me that we use this kind of tone. Like, that sounded really harsh to me. Or is there a nicer way we could do that? What was your goal here? And try to get clarity around, okay, this was your goal. You were trying to teach this. Could we do it in this way when we're both happy? Like, so each of us sees ourselves as a representative of our unified front. So he's going to sometimes be an ambassador for both of us, and I'm sometimes going to be an ambassador for both of us. Which means sometimes I'm going to carry an agenda of my husband's parenting that I might not have done on my own, but that I know is important to him. So then I'll carry that, and vice versa. But that's because of conversations we've had behind the scenes. And I know a lot of parents sometimes do that in front of their kids, and it is really hard. Just forgive yourself if you have, but it's never too late to come back and say, even especially if your kids are older, and say, you know what, we used to disagree about this stuff in front of you guys. We're not going to do that anymore. Here's what it's going to be like from now on. And like actually clearly articulate what the change of climate is going to be, and then just really stick with it, and because it shows respect. But I will say there's one caveat. Because I don't think I had the full respect at that time that I do now. So be aware of that, especially as mothers who have been like the front line. And if you've been really the one that's mostly bonded with the kids because you're nursing or you're home with them more, it's really easy to feel like you know everything, and the input of your husband isn't as important. But like you say, Kelly, they might see something from a different vantage point, and it's really valuable, and you have to listen, because if you don't, it's not just about the unified front thing that's so good for the kids. It's also just about feeling emotionally connected to each other. And if your spouse feels completely unimportant or negated or disrespected, then you're going to have power struggles.
Right.
It's going to make the disciplining part even worse.
Yeah.
I
think aside from just straight out verbal or physical abuse, I think that there are many times where we, especially as women, can be more hands-off and allow our husbands to
find their way,
because they also know what their kid needs. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and they might be honing in on a different need that they're focusing on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Men are wired, again, totally opposite of women. We're the nurturers, we're, the healers, we're the lovers, and the men are wired for totally different stuff. And so, depending on the sex of the child too, the man might be really trying to instill something, totally different. So that's why too, it's so important to sit down and have discussions about this stuff, so that you really can understand one another,
Yeah, totally. And what you were saying, Kelly, barring any kind of abuse, be more hands off. I 100% agree. And if you find that your spouse whether it's the wife or the husband is crossing lines and being verbally or physically abusive, then I think it's okay to not be a unified front. Then I think it's okay to stick up for your child, or to let your child know, I'm not on board with what they did. You didn't deserve that. It's not ideal to not be a unified front, but what's most important in an abusive situation, if you're with a spouse who's just really, like narcissistic or abusive, which I know that there are a few of you in the group that are dealing with that, then what's more important for the well-being of your child is to know that they have a parent who sees that that was wrong and that they don't condone it, because that's going to help them. They'll start to learn how to internalize their own boundary setting for themselves, to have a parent who's going to protect them with some healthy boundaries and say, it's not okay to be abusive, and I'm not going to prioritize a unified front with my husband if that means my child is abused. Like that's not what we're recommending, but we're talking really to situations where that's not what's happening. It's really just a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And there's more than one way to do it right.
That's another reason you have to have a sit down too, because different people have, like we're saying, aside from verbal abuse, physical abuse, well, what's your definition of physical abuse?
Yeah.
What's your definition of verbal abuse? You know what I'm saying? There are things that I do as a parent that other people might consider verbally abusive or physically abusive. You know what I'm saying? Because like I told you earlier, Monika, Ned and I both, fortunately, are in alignment around the discipline. So we're like a blend of like the old school approach, discipline, and the new, like more conscious, more democratic way of discipline as well, where the children have voice, you know, and have a safe space to make their voice be heard. But we crack down when that is necessary, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's okay and what's not okay, right, and finding that balance for you guys is so good. Yeah. Good. I was just going to see if there's anything else we missed on this. We really talked about like difference of opinions, and like if I have an idea for discipline and my spouse is against it, or vice versa. Why the stakes are so high, so it becomes fully charged, and the tendency to avoid when things are peaceful is a big problem around that.
Yeah.
And then finally, that tendency for one parent to feel either superfluous or judged or less than by the other parent, cut out of the decisions. And a lot of times that's the dad. It's not always the case. And I feel like we talked about that too. So yeah, I think that we've covered the big main issues that come up, the broader issues that come up. If you guys have any specific questions around this stuff and you want to ask them in the comments below, we will definitely answer those questions. But the biggest takeaway really is to come together and align around, where are your values the same? Where are your visions for your family legacy and your children, and what you want, how you want to raise them? Where do they line up? And then get to a place of emotional respect or emotional connection, and then respect with each other, where you can remember, hey, I love this person, they love me, we want the same thing. We have to be a little bit forgiving of each other's difference of opinions, and not get into the convincing me versus you mode, but get on the same team.
Right. So important.
That, of course, requires emotional connection, which is before communication. That requires clearing out the limiting beliefs, that a lot of times is going to involve doing your own inside out trauma work around, why is this such a triggering thing for me? Coming with that kind of self-awareness, all that deep inner work is very much a part of that too. But if you set your intention around getting on the same team, I think that you could reduce your problems in half just by setting your intention around that every day and coming together during times of peace to talk about it.
Totally.
Is there anything else you would add to that for people that are listening today as any takeaways?
Just get on the same team, be a united front. That's like the most important thing. Just always being united front. Period.
But once you can do that, then you actually have the kind of relationship that's not only great for parenting, but you're modeling the kind of relationship that they can expect to have when they grow up too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. So if you guys are interested in learning how you can apply this to your own relationship in your marriage, if you're struggling around how to get on the same team and trying to identify what are the barriers to getting on the same team, you're welcome to book a call with us at monikahoyt.com/talk. And that's a free phone call. We'll just do a deep dive around what's coming up, what are the issues, what are the barriers, and if it's a fit, like if it's something we think we can help you with, we'll let you know what that would look like. If it's not a fit and we know who would be a fit and we can point you in the right direction, we'll do that too. So feel free to book that if you want. I'll put the link below. And share this with anybody that could benefit. Tag them in it if you like. And otherwise, just reach out in the meantime in the comments, and we'll catch you next time for our topic next Thursday.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you, Matt and Kelly, for joining, and have a good rest of the day.
See you guys.
Bye.